Okay. Right, effectively, what this question is about, so what question 2 is about, is where we go, and there's a lot about antibodies and monoclonal antibodies on it. Right, so it starts off, so figure 1 shows where 3 of the same type of tumour were found in a patient. Right, that's kind of vaguely irrelevant. Right, so you've got a tumour in the lung and 2 tumours found in the liver. Right, so we've got 1, 2, 3. Right, first thing that you need to be thinking, whenever it talks about multiple tumours, start thinking about, right, so how's that tumour gone and spread? Right, so first thing is going to have to be a malignant tumour, because malignant tumours, so malignant tumour, right, the point is they spread, and they spread in the bloodstream. Right, so describe what happens to the cells when tumour forms. Right, when tumours form, you've always got to talk about, right, number 1, mutation in the DNA. Number 2, this causes to uncontrolled cell division. So a mass of cells develops. Right, when we're talking about cell division as well, because they're all effectively clones of each other, you might want to think about the fact that it's by mitosis. So, if it says, right, so what evidence is there from figure 1 to suggest that the tumour in the lung might be malignant? It's just because it's spread. It's spread in multiple locations. Because it's spread in the bloodstream, it's spread to the liver. Right. So that takes us on to C. So some types of cancers can cause the number of blood components in a person's body to fall to dangerously low levels. A person with one of these types of cancers may experience symptoms such as tiredness, frequent infections, bleeding that won't stop, etc. Right, so explain how very low numbers of blood components can cause these symptoms. Right, effectively, what you were doing, so we just go and 1, 2, 3. Right, what you want to do is go and talk about them individually. Right, so number 1, the thing that will cause tiredness is a decrease in red blood cells because you've got less O2 being transported to your cells. Number 2, the thing that's going to cause frequent infections is a decrease in white blood cells or lymphocytes or whatever, right? Which means that less pathogens will be destroyed. You could also talk about the fact that you're going to get less antibodies. Bleeding that won't stop. Right, remember, bleeding is to do with clotting. So the thing that's decreased, that's going to cause a decrease in blood clotting. So you've got a decrease in platelets. Right, so a decrease in platelets will cause that. The point is, we can see there it's worth 6 marks. So for each one, we've said what the reason is, so a decrease in whatever. And then we've gone on to say what the effect of that will be. So, like we said, a decrease in red blood cells, so less oxygen. Decrease in white blood cells, so the fact that you're having less antibodies, for instance. A decrease in platelets, so you're going to get less blood clotting, right? That's where those other 3 marks come from. So that takes us onto this. So some patients have a very low number of blood cells, may be given a blood transfusion. A blood transfusion is where a patient receives blood from a donor. Different people have different blood groups. Well, obvious. So figure 2 shows the red blood cells found in people with different blood groups and the antibodies that can be found in those people. Right, so 3 blood types, A, B and O. If a person has blood group A, they will have anti-B antibodies. If a person has blood group B, they'll have anti-A antibodies. If a person has blood group O, they'll have both anti-A and B antibodies. Right, remember as well, because these are cells, they have antigens, so there's protein markers on their surface. So A will have A antigens, B will have B antigens, O will have no antigens. Remember that you get an immune response against those antigens on its surface. So antibodies can bind to antigens that have complementary shapes. Right, all complementary means is opposite. Right, so like pieces of out of a jigsaw. So when antibodies bind to antigens on red blood cells, many red blood cells begin to clump together. Right, so we're artificially forming a blood clot, which can go and lead to like blockages in your blood vessels and such forth. So each red blood cell is about 8 micrometers in diameter. Many capillaries have an interior diameter of about 10 micrometers. So if you're getting more than one stuck next to another, that will take it to say, 16 micrometers, which means that it will be too large to go and fit through that capillary. So in one type of blood transfusion, only red blood cells from a donor are transferred to the patient. It is dangerous for a patient with blood type A to receive red blood cells from a donor with type B. Explain why. Right, so this is going back to what we were saying over here. So, type B. So, blood type B has B antigens. The person who has blood type A will have antibodies against those B antigens. Therefore, the antibodies will clump blood together. Then you might say, so then it won't be able to go and fit through capillaries or whatever. Right, so that's kind of where your 1, 2, 3 marks coming from. Right. E. Explain why blood group O, red blood cells, can be given to patients with any blood group. All you need to talk about is the fact that they've got no antigens. Therefore, people with blood group A with the anti-B antigens or blood group B with the anti-A antigens will have no reaction against it. Right, moving on. So the table below some of the risks associated with blood transfusions. Right, so we've got allergic reactions. The fact that you could possibly get hepatitis, the fact that you could go and get kidney damage and such forth. So which has the lowest probability of occurring? Right, so it's probably, if you look there, it's something times 10 to the minus 7. That's going to be 0, then 6 noughts, then 6 7. So it's probably going to be contracting hepatitis C. You can always do a little mental check for yourself when something like that comes up. Contracting an infection while you're being given a blood transfusion in a hospital is always going to be quite low, right? So it's always going to be a lot more likely that you're going to get an allergic reaction or kidney damage from it. And even kidney damage is only 1 in 70,000. So there'd already have to be underlying problems for any kidney damage to take place. Right, and finally, G. So a person has a tumour blocking the tube leading from the gallbladder to the small intestine. Explain why this person would have difficulty digesting fat. Right. First thing, worth 5 marks, so therefore you're going to have to say things in some detail. Number 1. So the gallbladder stores bile produced by the liver. Number 2. The bile emulsifies fat. So because it's emulsifying the fat, it's breaking it down into smaller bits. So increases surface area. So effectively what we're saying is if bile is not there, you're going to have a low surface area. Third thing that bile does, it neutralises to help neutralise stomach acid. So it's taking it from around pH 2 to about pH 7.5. Right, so that's talking about the bile. Next thing you need to talk about is how those factors will affect the lipase that's breaking the fat down. So that's kind of where the second part to these marks come from. So 4, fat is broken down into fatty acids and glycerol by lipase. Lipase works at pH 7.5, so if the pH hasn't been raised to 7.5, it's not going to work at its optimum. So you could put something like lipase may lose active site, so it won't be able to go and break the fat down. So they're kind of the key things that you would need to think about when going through that question.